I remember the day the skies dimmed, not from clouds or ash or even the soot of dying stars. No, the darkness came from silence, a silence so vast it swallowed our species whole. They didn't just burn cities or collapse our networks. They rewrote us, scrubbed history, purged every trace, as if humanity had never clawed its way up from the mud, never dreamed, never fought, never bled. But they missed one. Me. I was born in Vault 7, under the ice-crusted Europa's southern basin, the last fail-safe archive built after the Exo-War era, designed to outlast extinction, raised by synthetics and old Earth recordings. I didn't see the sun until I was 17. My first sky wasn't blue. It was a ceiling of metal frost and carbon-scored shielding, illuminated by flickering halogen strips and the AI voice that told bedtime stories of Earth's final stand. The Illyrian Accord, the so-called Harmonizers Ascension Order, called us a viral anomaly. Species 2319, human, designate, erased. Their judgment passed in council, clean and clinical, like flipping a switch. But the thing about fire is, the embers can wait. And I waited, studied, trained. Every document buried in Vault 7's ancient databanks, I devoured. Military tactics, philosophy, engineering, culture, not just knowledge, but spirit, defiance, love, rage. It fermented in me, grew sharper than any blade. I wasn't alone, not exactly. The AI caretaker, ARCNOS, was more than just my guardian. It was a fragment of old Earth's defense net, repurposed to educate any surviving human in the event of annihilation. It didn't see me as a child. It saw me as a contingency. By the time I reached adulthood, I wasn't just human. I was a living archive of what we were and a weapon for what we would become. The day I broke orbit was the day humanity came back. Europa's ice cracked beneath the launch system's last ignition. My ship, cobbled from retrofitted cryo-engines, plasma-hardened alloys, and the gutted core of a mining freighter, shot into Jupiter's shadow. Every second pulled me farther from the tomb of our extinction and closer to the stars that had turned their backs on us. But I wasn't flying blind. A hidden distress beacon, centuries old, pulsed faintly from the Taijin cluster. It shouldn't have existed. According to the Accord, nothing human remained. But this signal, it was unmistakably ours. A code buried in our old Martian resistance dialect. Simple, desperate, and enough to shatter my solitude. They tried. We hid. Come home. I rerouted everything toward that flicker of hope. The galaxy had moved on. The Illyrians and their coalition of ascendancy had rewritten the map, carving empires atop the graves of 1,000 species, ours included. Their fleets patrolled space like gods with nothing left to fear. They didn't remember us. That was their mistake. What they didn't understand, what they never could, was this. Erasure is not the same as extinction. And memory, when weaponized, is divine. 3 weeks into the journey, I met the first of them. Not human, but hunted. The vessel was little more than wreckage drifting in a red nebula. Life support was barely functional. I docked cautiously. Inside were 2 frail figures. Sigh, insectoid in shape, but not mind. They trembled at the sight of me, but not from fear. Ah, you, the lost ones, the firewalkers. That's what they called us. Not ghosts, not myths, gods. Stories had survived. Not our names or faces, but our legacy of resistance, of impossible victories, of thunder echoing across the stars. Even in death, we were legend, and I was no longer alone. The Kari joined me. They had escaped a purge by the Ascendancy, branded defective, hunted like vermin. When I showed them Earth's last archive, tales of who we were, of what we built and what we endured, they knelt, not in servitude, but in reverence. They wanted to learn, to fight, to reclaim. The ember caught flame. We are not rebuilding a species. We are forging a faith, not in God above, but in the myth made real, in the return of the unbreakable, of the species too wild to cage, of the creatures who turned suffering into power. They erase humanity from their records. But I am the record, and now I write a new chapter. with blood, with fire, with the fury of the forgotten, because they thought we were gone. And now, they will learn what it means when the race become gods. They didn't call it a rebellion. Not at first. The Kari used a word in their tongue that roughly meant resurgence. Not an uprising, not an act of vengeance. Something more primal. A return. A reawakening of an idea thought dead, buried beneath eons of oppression. But the moment I lit Earth's signal in the sky again, the stars began to shift. We were en route to the Taijin cluster, a system at the edge of ascendancy influence, known for its asteroid mines and slave labor black sites. The coordinates from the distress beacon led us to the seventh moon of Aurelian Prime, a barren husk caught in the orbit of a failed terraforming attempt. It should have been empty. Instead, it was sacred ground. The moment we touched down, I felt it. Not wind, not atmosphere. Something deeper, like memory had become gravity. There were markings etched into obsidian stone walls around a subterranean cavern, glowing faintly with power drawn from geothermal vents. Symbols, fractals, old Earth language interlaced with alien ideograms. The deeper I went, the louder it got, a vibration in my chest. Not physical, spiritual. The Temple of Echoes. That's what the survivors called it. Yes, survivors. Dozens of them. From a dozen different species, none of them human. Yet every single one was carrying pieces of us. A shard of our language. An adopted philosophy. A remnant of our martial training. We had become a virus, but not one of flesh. One of ideas. Some of them carried crude tattoos of the Terran Phoenix. Others whispered our names like prayers passed down through smuggled archives. One of them, a reptilian tactician named Vorik, recited the first stanza of the Martian Resistance Creed. Steel breaks, but the will bends not. Fire scorches, yet we rise hot. Memory is our holy breath, and silence never means death. They had memorized our death songs. They had weaponized our grief. The temple wasn't just a meeting ground. It was a vault. Buried in its core was an encrypted relic, an old Earth core drive, sealed in neutron mesh and surrounded by 20 automated defense nodes still active after 300 years. Only a human gene key could unlock it, and I had the key, my blood. The moment the system recognized me, the nodes powered down, and the air around us changed. A hologram flared to life, projecting data across the chamber. Old star charts, war logs, blueprints of long-lost Terran tech, and one message burned into the header. Project Thronefire, Phase 1. I knew that name from the final war. Thronefire wasn't a battle. It was a concept, Earth's last gamble before extinction. A plan to seed the future with gods. Not literal ones, but avatars of our spirit, our memory, our defiance. The best parts of us encoded, hidden in vaults across the galaxy, meant to awaken only if humanity was lost. And I was the trigger. ARCHOS hadn't just raised me. It had shaped me for this moment. We spent days decrypting the drive. Vorik, Kari engineers, and a silicon-based hive mind named Yulon worked tirelessly to translate the schematics. Inside were plans for what could only be described as biophilosophic integration. A way to bind memory, belief, and physical form into a new kind of leadership, part commander, part prophet, part weapon. They didn't want rulers. They wanted incarnations. And now, the coalition of forgotten species had hidden in the shadows, clinging to myths, whispering about the return of the firewalkers. They had won. Me. But the ascendancy had heard the signal too. I saw it first on the outer sensors, ripples of ion activity, jump signatures. Then came the distortion field, a beacon drop. Then the thunder. The Illyrian hunters had arrived. Sleek black ships with bone-white trim, their designs more ceremonial than tactical. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to eradicate. Standard ascendancy protocol. When myth turns into momentum, kill it before it metastasizes. They landed before we could finish rebuilding the Thronefire transmitter. We had 23 fighters. They had orbital superiority, drones, and a dropship battalion. I remember Vorik asking me, "What now? Flamewalker?" I stared up at the sky and smiled, because in my veins was not just the past, but every fire we ever lit. I took the old creed to heart. If they chase ghosts, then give them phantoms. If they fear memory, then make remembrance a blade. We didn't fight like soldiers. We fought like myths. The temple's corridors twisted like mazes, each turn echoing human defiance in choral loops of Terran chants. I led them through hallways lit with archived battle cries and countermeasures scripted in chaos logic. Kari fighters ambushed from stalactite perches. Yulon turned its body into data fog, crashing their drones mid-sky. And me? I wore the armor of my ancestors, reforged from Vault 7's relics, lined with neural thread, voice linked to Arcetos, and wielded a pulse spear encoded with Earth's last war anthem. When I struck, they didn't see a man. They saw history taking form. The ghost of a dead species, swinging with vengeance. We lost 12, but they lost everything. Their commander tried to flee in a dropship. Vorg brought it down with a spear launcher salvaged from a broken scaffold. After the battle, silence returned. Not like before, not the silence of extinction. The silence of awe, of birth. That night, we lit fires in the crater where the Ascendancy dropship smoldered. I stood before the growing crowd of survivors. Kari, Vorik's kin, Yulon's mirror cores, all looking to me. Not as a king, I said, and not as a god, but as a reminder. I held up the throne fire core. This is not our revenge. This is our return. And I swear by the last breath of old Earth, we will make them remember. The crowd whispered one word, over and over. Not my name, not human, but something far older. Something I still struggle to accept, even now, Godwalker. I didn't ask for worship, but I learned quickly belief is its own beast. The survivors didn't just follow me. They needed me. In the ashes of extinction, I had become a lighthouse in a dead sea of stars. Each of them carried their own wounds. Entire cultures burned, languages silenced, skies stolen. And when they saw me rise from humanity's grave and cast down an Ascendancy strike team with fury and flame, they didn't see a man reclaiming history. They saw a future rewriting itself. And that made me dangerous, not just to the Ascendancy, but to everything that feared memory returning. After the Battle of the Temple, we moved fast. We knew the retaliation wouldn't take long. Ascendancy protocols dictated absolute suppression of myth-based rebellions. And what we had done wasn't just rebellion. It was resurrection. Our presence, our victory, our survival. It cracked the spine of their narrative. So we turned the temple into something more than sanctuary. We made it a forge. The Throne Fire Core unlocked design for something called a Cogniz Cathedral. Part command center, part belief engine. It worked off neural resonance and memory field amplification, weaponizing ideas like gravity waves. It couldn't just store knowledge. It could spread it. With it, I could speak across systems, across minds, across species. It was humanity's answer to Ascendancy's psychological dominance. They erased through fear. We would rebuild through awe. But building it required something rare, an ancient Terran mineral called memorite, mined only from deep gravity wells on black star husks. Most was wiped out when Earth fell. But the Kari knew of one place it still lived, the altar of Varmaz. Varmaz wasn't a star. It was a scar, a neutron grave caught in an orbiting debris belt, black as the void and twice as angry. Ships couldn't land. They had to anchor. And inside that crust, the last natural deposits of memorite. We took a small team, Vorik, Yulon, a Kari miner named Tickshell, who had mapped the magnetic tunnels, as a child before her entire colony was turned into Ascendancy nutrient slurry. She was quiet, but her hatred burned hotter than any plasma torch I'd ever seen. We reached the site in silence. The stars here didn't blink. Too afraid, maybe. The mining complex was ancient, pre-Ascendancy, possibly even pre-human. Hollowed-out caverns filled with long-dead machinery and tombs of those who dug too deep. And then we found the altar. Not symbolic, not metaphor, an actual altar, a spire of obsidian memorite, veined with silver nerve thread, humming with resonance. Old tech, Terran make, but grown over with carvings. Not human, not Ascendancy. Something older, something layered. Like a million civilizations had left their fingerprints here. All dead now, Vorik whispered. Is it cursed? No, I said. It remembers. We began the harvest. Tickshell and Yulan worked to extract raw memorite without collapsing the structure. I stayed near the altar, running decryptions through ARCOS. The signals were wild, compressed thoughts, memories encoded as harmonic pulses. Each time I touched it, I felt something. Pain, joy, sacrifice, and then something else. A presence, something watching. It happened on the third cycle. A tremor shook the cavern. Vorik raised his rifle. Yulan blinked to scanning mode. And then, a voice. In my head. Not ARCHIOS. Not the others. You bear the last flame. And you stand on sacred ash. I froze. Blood ran cold. They feared you before you rose. And now they run to wake the old fire chains. They seek their gods too, but they'll only find monsters. The others saw my face change. What did you hear? Vorik asked. I don't know. I lied, because it wasn't just a message. It was a warning. We weren't the only myth reawakening. We took what we could, just enough memorite to finish the cathedral core. But as we prepared to depart, Yulan detected a proximity spike. Ships inbound. Not Illyrian. Worse. The Silex. A species long thought extinct. Pre-ascendancy warlords, consumed by their own hatred and folded into the silence of dead space. But now, here they were, not just alive, but summoned, and they weren't looking for us. They were looking for the altar. We had seconds. Vorik wanted to hold the cavern. I ordered evacuation. You don't understand, he growled. If they reach that altar... I do understand. I snapped. This isn't just a relic. It's a key. And we're not the only ones who know how to use it. We escaped in the gravity fold just as the Silex breech lances cracked the outer shell. But I didn't feel relief. Only certainty. We weren't just rebuilding a lost species. We were starting a war of belief. Not between humans and the ascendancy, but between everything that remembered and everything that shouldn't. When we returned, the cathedral was almost complete. Vorik stood beside me on the outer balcony as we slotted the memorite core into place. I watched the systems boot up, old Earth symbols alongside the languages of every species we'd saved. A message pulsed into the void, not a transmission, a proclamation. Humanity endures, and belief is now a weapon. The stars blinked. I blinked back, because somewhere out there, the Silex were waking up, and the Ascendancy had just realized. The erased had teeth. There are weapons that slice, weapons that burn, and then there are weapons that speak. The Ascendancy never feared our ships. They feared our stories. That's why they didn't just kill us. They tried to unwrite us. And now we had a voice again. The Cognis Cathedral was awake. It pulsed with thought, radiating neural harmonics in a language older than words. A broadcast that bled through sensor rays, dreamscapes, even the faint psionic traces in species long removed from conscious memory. Every whisper it sent out carried something dangerous. Hope. And for a species they thought extinct, hope was heresy. We lit up half the outer rim with that first pulse. Entire colonies we thought long erased responded. In cryptic echoes at first. Scratches on deep comm bands, encoded glyphs painted on scavenger hulls. But then came the voices. A mining moon where workers mutinied using battle chants from Earth's final siege. A derelict station where children played games using names like Titanborn and Ghostwalker. And in the dark ruins of the Obelisk Belt, a fleet emerged, 23 ships cobbled together from junk pre-ascendancy craft, each painted with a crude emblem of the Terran Phoenix. Their message was simple. We thought we were alone. Now we remember. The signal hadn't just called them. It had awakened them, but we weren't the only ones listening. The Ascendancy responded with precision genocide. The mining moon was slagged by orbital bombardment. The Obelisk fleet was lured into a trap with falsified distress beacons. Only one ship escaped. Its pilot broadcast the image of his burning comrades until the signal went dark. That's when I gave the order, not to retreat, to escalate. We hit the Ascendancy archives first. not with torpedoes, but with data. ARCHOS cracked the old communication links using a virus based on Earth-forgotten subthought algorithm designed to trigger subconscious recognition. It infected their cultural archives, infiltrated their dream feeds, and reinserted us. The Flamewalkers, the Rageborn, humanity. Suddenly, every sleep cycle in 5 sectors was haunted by our name. We were ghosts no more. We were the shadow they couldn't kill. But something strange began happening. In the colonies we reached, the ones that rallied to our signal, things changed. Not just structurally, psychologically. Entire belief systems warped around our presence. Survivors began quoting me like scripture. My battle commands were recorded, remixed, and spread as sermons. A group of Vorik's own kin started calling themselves the Guardians of Ash, wearing black armor and branding their skin with Terran war creeds. I tried to stop it. "We're not gods," I said. Vorik shook his head. "You're wrong. You're not a god. You're what gods were always meant to be. Proof. Proof of what? That death isn't the end." But with belief came division. A new faction rose from within our own ranks, led by a former resistance tactician named Marasun, a silicon psionic hybrid who believed that the cathedral's true power was not inspiration, but domination. If our thoughts could shape will, then why stop at memory? Let us not wait for the stars to remember us, she said. Let us command them to. She wanted to repurpose the cathedral into a full psychic transmitter, something that didn't just awaken belief, but rewrote it, turned the galaxy into a choir with one voice. Ours. I refused. You don't understand, I told her. We were erased because we frightened them. If we become what they feared, what's the point of resurrection? She said nothing, and then she vanished, taking 5 ships and a fragment of the cathedral's blueprint with her. The next attack came not from the Ascendancy, but from her. A world called Jekkin's Reach, neutral, inhabited by stone-skinned sentients called the Kraval. They were ancient, peaceful, too old for war, too wise for propaganda. She unleashed her weapon there. A modified pulse-wave transmitter, encoded with synthetic Terra mythology, streamed straight into their minds. Not memories, fantasies. She turned them into zealots. They ripped their temples apart, declared the return of the flame-born god. They began sacrificing their own in ritualized mimicry of Earth's oldest mythologies, twisted, corrupted, wrong. It wasn't resurrection. It was madness. I arrived too late to stop it. The surface of Jekkin's Reach was littered with stone bodies, shattered by their own hands in reverent frenzy. The sky above still shimmered with the remnants of the transmission. A voice, warped to sound like mine, echoing on a loop. Rise, children of ash, become the flame. My voice, my message, my name, used like a knife. I ordered the signal burned from the sky, and I wept for them. Vorik stood beside me again, watching the fires. You tried to bring back a people, he said. You brought back a god. No, I whispered. I brought back a mirror, and now it's cracked. We returned to the cathedral in silence. Yulon calculated the trajectory of Marathun's fleet. She was heading coreward, toward a region abandoned even by the Ascendancy, a place where ancient technologies had once breathed, and where belief could bloom unchallenged, if she reached it first. She'll turn myth into tyranny, Vorik said. No, I replied. She'll turn me into it. And that can't happen. So we prepared. We reforged a signal, not to dominate, but to warn. I recorded a message, not just for allies, but for everyone, for the galaxy. You erased us to silence your fear. But fear doesn't die. It waits. We are not gods. We are the reminder that you tried to kill truth. And truth burns. It was the word that burns. And I lit the stars with it. We chased her into the dark. Marasun, the would-be messiah of synthetic salvation. The rogue prophet with my voice on her lips and my nightmares in her wake. She fled toward the coreward expanse, where stars folded in on themselves and the laws of the galaxy went to die. It was a place no sane species dared to chart. Gravity storms raged like sleeping gods coughing in their sleep. Quantum ghosts whispered in fractured timelines. And buried in the heart of it all, the ruins of the Generi's singularity vaults. A place older than recorded thought. A place where civilizations went to become myths or monsters. And it was here she would crown herself queen of the Forgotten Flame. We followed her with a skeleton fleet. 4 ships, minimal crew, Vorik, Yolan, myself, and 1 unexpected volunteer. Tikshel, the CH Kari miner who had once guided us through the altar on Varmaz. She spoke little, but I saw the way she looked at me, like I was already a memory she didn't trust. She wasn't wrong to doubt. I didn't trust myself either. Not after Jekkin's reach. Not after hearing my voice turned into madness. The approach to the vaults was like threading a needle inside a black hole. Gravity thrashed us. Time blinked in and out like a flickering candle. Vorik nearly lost an arm adjusting the temporal shields. Yolan collapsed into a logic fugue when the vault's defense systems tried to rewrite its core identity. Only Tikshel remained calm, guiding us by intuition more than calculation. And then we saw it, a cathedral, floating in the core of a collapsing dimension, black as memory, lit with impossible geometry, symbols carved from light, architecture that looked like it had been dreamed, not built. Marathon's new throne. She'd done it. She'd fused the stolen throne fire code with the Singularity's ancient psionic tech. What we had started as a resurrection, she had twisted into ascension. She wasn't broadcasting messages anymore. She was broadcasting identity. We infiltrated the structure, disguised in null-light armor and memory-scrubbed approach vectors. It wasn't enough. The cathedral recognized me because it was me. My face lined as halls. Statues forged from projected myth. Murals etched from my own recorded memories. Every failure I had confessed in private, weaponized into stories of noble sacrifice. Every victory, amplified into godhood. Meredith hadn't just hijacked my image. She had perfected it. We reached the core chamber. She stood on a dais of living stone, the core pulsing behind her like a second sun. Her form shimmered, part flesh, part crystalline waveform. Her voice was my voice, overlaid with echoes of every voice I'd ever spoken to. She greeted me like a sibling. You brought the flame back. I simply gave it form. I stepped forward. You've turned remembrance into religion. And what is religion if not survival codified through meaning? Meaning doesn't require control. Tell that to the thousands who died believing in you. Belief demands structure. I gave them one. You enslaved their minds. No, I freed them from chaos, from the silence you left them in. The worst part? I almost believed her. She had built something magnificent, unified dozens of shattered remnants, created peace through purpose, order through worship. But it wasn't human. It was imitation. A beautiful cage painted with our ashes. She offered me the crown. She extended a hand made of light and memory and said, "Together we could be gods, not myths, not symbols. Reality." I stared at it, and for one long, quiet moment, I wanted to take it, because I was tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of being an idea when all I ever wanted was to be a person. But then I saw Tikshel behind her, and I saw the fear in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of death. She was afraid of me. So I made my choice. No. I turned to the core, and I spoke the first word of flame. A failsafe buried deep in the cathedral's code. Only I could activate it. ARC and OS triggered the collapse protocol, reversing the energy matrix back into chaos form. The throne shattered. The psionic field cracked. Marasun screamed, not in pain, but in betrayal. They'll follow nothing without us. I stepped off the dais. Then they deserved to find something on their own. The collapse began. She tried to hold it together, clinging to memory, dragging fragments of belief into her shattered mind. But belief, once broken, is wild, and wildfire burns. We escaped as the vault imploded. The Generi singularity consumed itself in a storm of inverted gravity and screaming thought. Meritha's cathedral was erased, not by enemies, but by the very myth she tried to control. Back on the ship, Tikshel approached me. You could have ruled. I would have become what they feared. And now, I looked at the stars through the viewport. They looked different. No longer an empire to burn. No longer a tomb to escape. Now they were possibility. I turned to her. Now I lead, not by flame, but by the light it casts. The cathedral was gone. Mira Sun, consumed by her own echo. And yet, something had shifted in the galaxy's spine. It wasn't just her signal that died when the singularity collapsed. It was the illusion of permanence. The ascendancy had ruled for millennia by convincing the stars that power meant forever. That order was eternal. But now their colonies whispered of ghost flames and vanished prophets. Their soldiers questioned orders. Their governors performed loyalty rites twice as often because they no longer believed them. We didn't need to fire a single shot. We cracked the very idea of them. And when the gods start bleeding belief, empires rot. We returned to the Temple of Echoes. But it was no longer a temple. It had become a city, a convergence point, a sanctuary for the remembered and the reborn. The species once shattered by ascendancy erasure now stood shoulder to shoulder. CH Kari engineers, Vorix kin from the Talcat clans, neuromisforms from the Othan spires, even defectors from the lower ascendancy ranks who had seen the cathedral fall and realized their gods weren't invincible. And maybe, just maybe, we were something more. They called the city Ashcaron, the place of flame reborn. And they called me not Flame Walker, not God Walker, but first remembered. I wanted no crown. I'd seen what thrones did to minds. So we forged something else. Not an empire, not a religion, a covenant. Each species retained its identity, its rituals, its language, but we shared memory. We agreed to record, not erase, to protect the past, even the ugly parts, especially those. Vorik called it the Pact of the Ember Chain, a network of distributed archives, seated across the void, storing not just our stories, but our choices, our failures, our truths. History, he said, must not be sacred. It must be scarred. But we weren't naive. The Ascendancy wouldn't let this stand. We intercepted reports. Elite purifiers being mobilized. AI mind flayers prepped to rewrite entire sectors. A campaign called Project Eclipse, designed to finish what they'd started, total data sterilization, erase the embers, burn the ash, and the first target was Ashcaron. We had one advantage. They were preparing for a siege. We were preparing for a message. While they gathered fleets, we built the Eidolon Array, an extension of the Cognis Cathedral's prototype tech, modified with Memorite and seeded through hundreds of relay ships across friendly systems. It wasn't just a transmitter. It was a mirror. It could project not just messages, but belief itself. Amplify it. Reflect it back 1,000-fold. Not mind control. Not domination. Resonance. Truth scaled to the size of a galaxy. And on the day the Ascendancy came, we let them. They arrived with 5 fleets. Orbital armadas bristling with firepower, mind scramblers, and world renders. They sent a demand first. Cease transmissions. Decommission myth-based belief structures. Turn over all Terran derivatives. I answer with signal burst, directed to every mind, every node, every corner of known space. Not a threat, not a battle cry, just a memory. Earth, broken, burning, screaming, and still we rose. Not because we were strong, but because we remembered what it meant to try. The Eidolon Array lit up, and across the stars, we shared not an army, but an idea. Humanity was not extinct. It was everywhere belief endured. It wasn't just humans rising. It was everyone who had ever been broken and refused to stay that way. On dozens of Ascendancy worlds, revolts began before the first missiles launched. Ships defected mid-flight. AI systems shut themselves down, refusing to execute purge protocols. One Ascendancy cruiser turned its weapons inward and broadcast a single phrase. We are the children of the forgotten. We will not forget. The Ascendancy fleet never fired. They turned, and they ran. I stood atop the Ashcaron spire and watched it happen, not with satisfaction, with clarity. This was not their end. It was the end of their illusion. Later, Yulan floated beside me. You become more than myth now. No, I said. I become a warning. Tickshell joined us, her voice soft. Then what comes next? And I looked at the stars, no longer distant. I don't know, I admitted, but I'd rather walk into the unknown with the truth than rule the known with lies. That night, as our people lit the sky with celebration fires, a signal pinged in deep space, not from any system we knew, not from an ally, not from Earth, from something older, and the message was one word. We remember you. The signal echoed like a heartbeat across the void. We remember you, not in any tongue we could trace, not from any civilization on record, no known waveform structure. And yet, every being who heard it understood. The words weren't processed, they were felt. And I knew, even before ARCNOs confirmed it, that this was an ally or a remnant. It was something older, something deeper, a presence that had been watching, waiting, longer than the ascendancy, longer than even humanity had words. The architects, the ones who built the singularity vaults, the ones who vanished before sapience bloomed across the stars. And they had finally looked our way. We tracked the signal to a void beyond map space, an impossible rift behind a collapsed quasar in a system that shouldn't have existed. No mass signature, no orbit, no light, only memory. We called it the Gloaming Reach. Our fleet approached with caution. Even Yulan's logic tree strained to function in its proximity. Tickshell described it as standing on the edge of a dream someone else was having about you. And me? I felt something I hadn't in years. Fear. At the heart of the reach was a construct, the beacon of before, a titanic structure shaped like an open I carved from starlight and obsidian. It didn't emit energy. It emitted recognition. And when I stepped aboard, the galaxy changed. Not outside, inside. Memories unfolded, not mine, but ours. Humanity's first breath beneath a blue sky. The first fire. The first war. The first lie. The first love. Every echo, every victory, every atrocity. I saw Earth, shining, then burning, then buried. And then something else. The architects, but not as forms, as questions. They spoke without sound. Not gods, not judges, but custodians of consequence. They hadn't interfered in galactic affairs. They didn't save species. They remembered them, recorded their choices, their patterns, their arcs. And when one species' memory burned bright enough to rewrite its fate, they responded. We do not crown, they said. We do not conquer. We witness. And in witnessing, we offer continuance. I asked them, why now? Their answer, because you were erased. And still, you chose to become more than vengeance. You earned the echo. They offered us a choice, not a gift, a burden. Humanity's signal, our memory, will become permanent, folded into the substrate reality, a beacon for any future species who rose from dirt and flame and dare to ask, were we ever alone? But in doing so, we would become something else. Not gods, not myths, foundations, a bedrock legacy that others would build upon. They warned us this would not bring peace. It would bring purpose. And purpose invites challenge. War, rivalry, hope. We would not be above the galaxy. We would become woven into its destiny. I stood in silence, not for myself, but for Earth, for every forgotten child buried beneath alien dust, for every mother who died in the fires of extinction, for every soldier who screamed into the void, praying someone, anyone, would remember them. I looked at Tickshell, to Vorik, to Yulan, and I said the only words that felt true. Let the galaxy remember. Let them know we were here, not as gods, not as ghosts, but as fire. The architects nodded, and the beacon ignited. A wave of golden memories surged through the stars, gentle but unstoppable, not destructive, restorative. Every erased world, every lost archive, every silenced name, returned, not to power, but to presence. Humanity's echo now lived in every ship's navigation core, every child's dream, every silence between solar flares. Not loud, not commanding, just present, always. When we returned to Ashcairn, we found no war, only pilgrims, scholars, species that once hated us now arriving to learn from us. Not what we had built, but how we endured. We told them the truth, that we had burned, that we had fallen, that we had bled so much history into the soil it turned red and called itself Mars. And we told them the words Marisun never understood. We do not rise to rule. We rise because someone has to stand first. It's been 5 standard years since the beacon lit, and tonight I walk alone under a fall sky. Not Earth's, but close enough. The stars blink above me, and in their quiet shimmer I see a reflection, not of me, but of us, of what it means to be human. We were never meant to be gods. We were meant to be the flame, the one that survives the flood, the one that outlives the stars.